When you say compliance, you're talking about individual budget holders obeying or adhering to a set of rules.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, it was a culture at the time where people could go out and they could negotiate contracts, and then they could bring them to their stakeholders and budget holders in the business and say, look at this great contract that I have for you. And the stakeholder could choose whether or not to use that contract or whether to go source with somebody else. That was not an environment that engendered success. And also, it wasn't an environment where you were really aligned to the stakeholder needs. And that was the first part of this whole sourcing management process that we brought in, was this intense study of business requirements with the stakeholders, truly understanding what they needed from an assurance of supply, from quality, from service, from innovation from the supply base, in addition to driving down cost. So we didn't come in and say, we're going to cut costs for you, because the first thing that people thought was, oh, you're going to cut costs, that means I'm going to get poorer quality, I'm going to get poorer service, I'm not going to get it when I need it, and I'm certainly not going to get any value added from my suppliers who are always giving me free things, right? So we first had to design a process, a source management process, that assured our stakeholders, no, not only will you get reduced cost, but you're going to get better service, you're going to get better quality, you're going to get better assurance of supply as part of this, because we're going to drive this with the best suppliers, the most efficient suppliers, the ones who are leading edge or bleeding edge, and the ones who have the most innovation to offer you. And that's what we're going to focus on by doing this. And that was the real buy-in element that we needed to get within the organization, within the entire Merck organization.
At the start of the process, you held several supplier forums where you asked suppliers to reduce cost to Merck by 20% over a 3-year period. In fact, I believe that you asked some of the suppliers to, in fact, write checks for the first installment in pretty short order. How successful was that supplier forum initiative?
Well, first, we didn't so much ask them to write checks as we said to them, we want to get in this 20% of savings that we think we can achieve with all of them. We said we want to see delivery of that first year, that first 7% upfront, or as close upfront as possible, because we believed that in many of the categories of spend that we were paying what we would call a pharmaceutical premium. In other words, they had a different pricing structure for selling to pharmaceutical companies than they did for other companies, because they assumed that pharmaceutical companies have higher margins and therefore they could charge higher prices to us as a customer. And we felt that, first of all, that was unfair. Why should we be treated that way? If we have high margins in our business because we're in a very high-risk business, and that's the only way to make the risk-reward ratio and have a successful business model within pharmaceutical. But that doesn't mean we should pay higher prices for our management consulting and for our car fleets and for our printing and for our computers and whatever else we needed to run the company. And so what we said to them was this, we need you to be players here. And we need to find out, we're going to do this seriously, and we're going to select our best suppliers, and we're going to change suppliers if you're not the best supplier. And we believe that prices can come down by 20% and costs can come down, but we want you to be part of the process. So give us a white paper with ideas on how we can take cost out of the system so we can bring the price down by 20%, but at the same time create a win-win situation with you as suppliers and build on a much longer term relationship with you. And it was interesting, the reaction. About a third of our suppliers basically said, you know what, that sounds fair, we can do that. And they stepped up to the plate. About another third said, you know what, that's kind of difficult, but we want to play ball with you. It may not be 20%, maybe it'll be 10%, maybe 15 or whatever, but we want to be one of your suppliers going in the future. We've been a long-term supplier with you, and you know, we'll cooperate to the extent we can. And then there was another third of the suppliers that basically said, I have exploited you forever, and I'm going to continue to exploit you because I don't think you're really going to change. You've done this kind of stuff before. You're not serious. You don't have the pull-through in the organization. We will backdoor you. We'll just go to our stakeholders and budget holders. We'll get them to make sure the orders get placed with us. So nobody would actually come out and say those kind of things, but you knew that was going on. And so we saw fairly substantial success initially just by the fact that 1/3 of our top suppliers did step up to the plate and started handing us rebate checks. Now those rebate checks would go straight back into the corporate coffers and be returned to the shareholders. And that was an important part of the process as well. It was not used to fund the infrastructure or the procurement process. So it was used to demonstrate the fact that we were going to have a viable process and we were going to make it work and we're going to have a supply base that was responsive to our needs.
We are now a couple of years after the start of the change. How successful would you say Merck's procurement initiative has been?
Well, when we first set out, we set a goal of saving $1.2 billion over a 5-year period of time for the company. Now, this compares to what was a run rate of about $100 million a year in savings prior to that. So had Merck continued on without doing a global procurement transformation, over a 5-year period it would have saved about $500 million. What we proposed was $1.2 billion over that 5 years. Well, we achieved that 20 months early. So not only did we deliver it 3 to 4 times the rate that normal, but we accelerated that. And it was a huge success, so much so that as we came to the close of that $1.2 billion initiative, which, by the way, the CEO took to Wall Street and made part of its guidance to the street regarding procurement savings, when we got close to hitting the $1.2 billion, we basically gave the CEO a check, one of those big fake checks, for $1 billion, and said, once we hit the $1.2 billion, by the year 2010, we're going to give you another $1 billion as well. Because we knew that what we had started and what we had put in place in this transformation, it was almost like a turbine engine. Once you get it going, it just keeps revving higher and higher and higher, and the production that was coming out of the procurement function, working closely with our internal stakeholders and budget holders, was driving huge savings. And so the rate of savings was very, very high. So we felt very comfortable about continuing on with that commitment.
As this initiative was rolled out, there have been a lot of changes at Merck. How have people at Merck bought into the new procurement system?
I think those resistance pockets are long gone. When we first started out, though, it was a difficult transition for a number of people. We put everybody through a skills assessment to understand whether or not they were capable of working to the new sourcing management process and the new demands that we were making. And the majority of them were. They were very smart people there at Merck. But there were some who it just wasn't right for. And so we encouraged those people to either look for other positions within the organization. Some of them, unfortunately, also had to exit the company. But it was important to get people aligned with what we were doing, that this transformation process was serious and that there was no going back on it once we started. And the momentum started building, and what really happened is that procurement people all of a sudden realized that they were now being empowered to do what they always really needed to do anyway. And being unshackled in that way and allowing them to operate as true professionals aligned to the strategy of the company as opposed to just the procurement function. That was very liberating for them. And that, as well as bringing in a number of skilled people from the outside who had done this at other companies to help show the way and encourage them as well. The combination of doing that, were there some issues and hiccups? Yeah, because you had all of a sudden this mix of old-time Merck people, newbies coming in, and how were they going to really get along and who was going to step on whose toes? And you had to sort through those kind of issues. But we did a lot with trying to build rapport, with trying to build teamwork, with trying to get everybody on the side of driving toward common goals and rewarding success, no matter who it was from, and being able to continuously monitor and measure, and to make sure that those who were successful were fully recognized for their success. So that drove a lot of the behaviors that we needed to drive. But more importantly is that set a tone for what could be done throughout the rest of the company and another number of other areas and shared services as well. And now Merck has embarked on a huge global support function initiative, which is based on creating a common platform of data for the company, which is an SAP type of platform, and then also creating shared services for things like site services that could deliver globally around the world, for finance and for IT and for HR and for public affairs and for legal and logistics and distribution. All of these are being driven now as a corporate shared services environment in the same manner that procurement did its transformation. And that's been very energizing for procurement because now we're not alone as a service provider into the company. Now everybody, including us, we're all doing it the same way, providing value into our stakeholders and our budget holders throughout the company in a much more efficient and productive way. So it's been great to be part of a cultural change and a cultural shift that we've created within Merck, and that's part of our plan to win as a company.